These both are a really good listen. It's usually a lot of improv. They're uncut gems. Beautiful uncut diamonds. Think about it like that. And if you observe it, you'll see the beauty within. Now, as I evolve in the craft, I will learn how to polish this and deliver it simplifically and very like well packaged and all that stuff. And I gotta learn literature and I gotta learn presentation and I gotta learn time management into it. This is just a I want to get it out project, you know? So pay attention and you'll find something. You maybe not. Who knows? Be a really, really interesting dive in. So to kill a multiverse, you have to prove that your verse is more stronger in choices than the other verse that's parallel, right? And that's the question. AI. We're using AI, all right? Because we're going into extreme quantum computing here. We're going to need help understanding, you know, from a fresh perspective, right? So if you're talking about, if you want to go that verse A can defeat or destroy verse B, you need to establish that verse A has a relative advantage over verse B, right? Calling something a parallel universe only establishes that it's another universe slash timeline. You still need evidence that the characters are, yeah, so anyway. So in theory, one verse is where I'm smoking cigarettes, right? We could run this all back, right? So in theory, one verse is where I'm smoking cigarettes. In theory is another verse where I quit cigarettes. Would be, so that stands with the choice ultimately is the stronger verse, right? If a verse is created off of a choice, right, and it branches, there was one verse where I chose, and there was one verse where I chose not to. Whatever was the powerful effect, right? So if it's weighing down on me, if this inanimate object causes me to move, it shifts my timeline to create a futuristic me that's ensnared by nicotine. So yes, as a multiverse thought experiment, you can frame it that way, but stronger has a specific meaning. Imagine verse A, you smoke cigarettes. Imagine verse B, universe B, you choose not to smoke. Both universes are otherwise identical. The choice itself doesn't make verse B physically stronger. It means verse B contains a different branch of history resulting from a different decision. Right. So, break it down like this. Different choice equals different timeline slash branch. It doesn't equal different timeline equals automatically stronger timeline. Stronger timeline requires some measurable consequence of that choice. Stronger timeline requires some measurable consequence of that choice. There was no measurable consequences of this. I want tobacco, I'm going to get it, and it's more powerful than me. You know, so obviously the inanimate object was more powerful, just creating, you know, the stronger timeline requires a measurable consequence of that choice. I know I shouldn't touch it. I know I should stay away, and I'm not going to falter. Now you're actually, you know, you're solidifying your verse and you're standing on that so that this does not affect your future self. And philosophically, there's a cool angle. The version of you who quits isn't necessarily in a stronger universe. He's the version who made the stronger choice. So right here where I stand, now why I always say like parallel universes, because I always wonder why there's another, why does it have to be so, why does this reality have to collapse? Why does it have to be confrontation, right? If there's a version that I said, I'm done with this, why does it have to resurface? Because parallel universes do exist, right? Your choices branch out. Imagine all the choices that you thought you made. Imagine all the choices you made by mistake. Think about that one. Like, let's just say, so if the butterfly effect, and this is off script, but if the butterfly effect is, you know, one small change in the past, right? Let's say you didn't even know how to play a video game correctly. Let's say you're doing something randomly. Is that still under, like, like preordained control? Do random events also shape into the fact of destiny? These are cool angles. Anyway, so the version who made the stronger choice. Here we stand, making that choice. Now, the influence is there. So I riddle, but the different decision from verse B, which would be to smoke cigarettes, would then become the main verse if I choose to do it when I quit. Exactly. If you're using the branching universe model, that's a coherent way to describe it. Say the decision point is choice, right? Labeled as smoke versus don't smoke. You could imagine verse A, you choose to smoke. That branch now continues as its own timeline. It becomes the main verse, right? Based on choice. The choice creates the timeline. See, multiverse is so interesting. Verse B, you choose not to smoke, that branch continues separately, right? So here we go, right? In between that fork, that's where that branch kind of, and then you already know, like, okay, I smoked, I gotta quit, I gotta do all this stuff, I gotta do all these requirements. Whereas if you just didn't do it, you wouldn't even be faced with those trials and tribulations, So it's pretty cool. If later you choose to smoke after previously quitting, your current timeline doesn't literally get replaced by verse A. Instead, your current line changes from that point forward. So you choose to smoke after previously quitting right now. Your current timeline doesn't get replaced by verse A. Instead, your current timeline changes. So we think that, oh, well, there was a verse where I didn't do it and it continued on. That if I cut out this action on the main branch, that this is just going to merge back in. No, that's not how quantum mechanics works. You just now branched off a branch of that branch and you're in a different section. In that verse A, you didn't smoke. Here you did smoke and you quit, but here you abstained. So two different realities, but now you branched off even more deeper into the multiverse. Follow along. This stuff is... Instead, your current timeline changes from that point forward. So if you're calling the timeline, how long have we been recording for? I hate that it doesn't tell me. 7 minutes, I got 10 minutes. So we're going to do this into 3 parts, maybe. So if you're calling the timeline, you're currently experiencing the main verse, then whichever choices you actually make become the history of that main verse. The interesting part is that you don't need to imagine yourself jumping between universes to explain it. In the branching model, you're simply continuing along one branch while the alternative represents what could have happened. It's tangible. It's there. I hit this like this, and I choose not to. You see? I choose to hit it. It's tangible. Really, really cool. Really cool. And if you want to use, right, the main verse isn't inherently stronger. It's simply the branch you're actually experiencing, right? So if there's very different versions everywhere and you've experienced very different versions, right? Like archetypes, split personality disorder, you got influential, influence. These all shape somebody's timeline because now these are pivotal points in which they make decisions, right? The influence, right? I was left in front of a TV. I watched SpongeBob. This became my reality for about 4 or 5 years. Somebody else's reality, instead of giving them SpongeBob, they gave them books and studying, and they became, like a nerd tech and created some. You see what I'm saying? Same dimensions, but different possibilities, creating different timelines. So your main verse isn't inherently stronger. It's the verse that you're actually experiencing. But knowing the parallels exist when making a decision is key. Exactly. In the thought experiment, awareness of the alternatives change how you approach the decision. You could think of it like branch A, I smoke. Branch B, I don't smoke. You right now, you're standing at the decision point and knowing both outcomes are conceivable. You're using clairvoyance. You're using, like your psychic abilities. You're in control of your destiny as well. You're rising above all the predictive programming that they want you to do. Now you have a choice. Your choice determines which path your actual timeline follows from that point forward. But there's a subtle distinction. Knowing a parallel outcome exists doesn't prove that parallel universe literally exists. It's a useful model for thinking about choices and consequences. So, unfortunately, if you're aware of it, then I know that it's going to exist. It's not existing right now until I give it the power, right? So the main verse is the inherently stronger verse based on the choice that you're going to make, because it reflects the next set of decisions that's going to alter the outcome. If it has an altered outcome, every verse has an altered outcome of something. Choices and consequences. In psychology, that awareness can be more powerful. So if I'm thinking about the choices and the consequences following it from it, I can kind of already perceive that yes, it doesn't exist, but I can bring it about into fruition. Now I could sit here and say, well, I'm not gonna put this down until 5 seconds, right? I'm not gonna put this down until 5 seconds, right? So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's the verse that exists. I did it on command. I'm not gonna put it down until 5 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Completely against the whole thing, but still, the choice is what creates the next. Can I help you?
You okay?
Yeah, I'm just understanding multiverses.
Okay.
So keep entertaining me on the topic. Now we're getting into the fun version of it. Imagine your life as a giant branching tree. At every meaningful decision, reality forks. You want a cigarette, you smoke. You don't want a cigarette, you don't smoke. And here's the crazy philosophical part. The main verse is determined from inside the verse itself. From your perspective, your current timeline always feels like the main timeline. The smoking version of you would wake up thinking, this is my reality. The non-smoking version would think, this is my reality. Neither version experiences itself as the alternative, because it can't until the choice is made. Now introduce awareness. This is where awareness, and like clairvoyance, because you're seeing beyond usually what ensnares you or traps you, or let's just say you go back with a different perspective. You try a new set of skills now, because it's like, okay, I need to introduce awareness into my present moment to create the future that I truly want. So now you're standing at the decision point, can mentally look at both possibilities, right? So from a smoker's perspective, I know what happens if I smoke, and I know what happens if I don't, right? So, maybe about a week ago, I was like, I know I shouldn't. I let certain habits get in my mind, and it affected my performance. It affected that timeline's performance, athletically, mentally. I was more hooked into it. Now I'm finding more pivotal points to introduce it into my timeline, right? So it goes back with the annotation of I know what happens if I do, and I know what happens if I don't. That is awareness. That's almost like having a tiny observer outside the branches of your multiverses, even though you're still physically inside one. I'm sorry for the dogs. So we're going to continue with the part 2. So this is where it's going to start to get interesting. This is part 2 on the multiverse and understanding it with awareness and a lot more. It's a long dive in, so bear with me. There's going to be 3 parts. What if choices are how the multiverse selects its story? Every time you choose, you're effectively saying this version of events I'm going to continue experiencing. This is the version of events I'm going to continue experiencing. That's powerful. Subconsciously or consciously, right? Subconsciously or consciously, that is power. because it's going to dictate and steer your whole life direction. This is the version of events I'm going to continue experiencing. Not necessarily because you're literally jumping universes, but because your future is being constructed from that decision. So imagine Cody Prime, he quits smoking. 6 months later, has an urge, knows the alternative path already exists, chooses not to smoke. That choice creates, and I love this word, it's called divergence. You can keep doing this indefinitely, and you can create a bunch, and this is where the multiverse goes crazy, because after that divergent, and you know how much power you have by just putting down that action right there, this is divergence. I know that, hey, I can probably create a little draw out of wood. I could create more possibilities on my timeline. You keep doing this indefinitely. Your life becomes a constantly branching decision tree. So instead of being led, and sometimes we flow with the river of life, right? We're in control of that ship by the decisions that we make. And it's kind of fucking weird because somebody was like reactive, right? Reactive, observe how you are reactively. And I think also by taking a second and realizing how you are reactively, you can make better decisions in that branching multiverse decision tree. And from that perspective, quitting isn't merely I stopped smoking. It's at that branch point I selected the future where I didn't continue smoking. And there's even a crazier philosophical question. If every possible choice has a parallel branch, does free will mean choosing which branch you experience, or does every choice already happen somewhere? So this is what I responded with. It starts with influence, because how can you design your own timeline with just basic knowledge, right? That's where it gets complicated. Sometimes we create mazes of reality under the materials we discovered on Earth, whether it was passed down, whether we had that door open for us, whether we stumbled. This is through our experiences how we create our timelines, which is actually pretty interesting. So as a philosophical sci-fi model, you're touching on something genuinely interesting. The difference between discovering possibilities and constructing possibilities. Think of it this way. Reality, the materials, knowledge, the tools, choices equal new environments. We start with basic things. We discover wood, metal, electricity, and then eventually we combine them into new things that would seem impossible. That's actually pretty dope. Because now, if our timeline was just so, it only had knowledge of how a puddle was, a little lake, but it never saw an ocean, and then you finally get to see the ocean. It's the same thing with the basic things. Wood, electricity, silicone, and now we have AI. Now we expanded, and this is what we want to do. We want to expand the human consciousness to experience life in so many avenues. Not just this, you're designed for work, you're designed to die, you're designed to live under this construct. That's not even your life. That's a pre-packaged life. That has nothing to do with you. And sometimes, people are so depressed, and this has a lot to do with the reality of it, is because they're so depressed that that's not who they wanted to be. And yet it's imposed on us. Now, when we take back the power is when we can make little micro transactions, micro choices that affect, because something little, it's called a snowball effect. We know that these little micros will thus create a macro. It's going to create something big. So, to summarize, maze of reality gets interesting. Each layer creates new possible states that weren't accessible at the previous layer. So, yeah. So now, let's just say verse A and verse B, right? Verse A was Cody going back to cigarettes, thus entrapping his mind, thus staying on a lower level. But that branched out because I made the choice. Verse A, he said, hey, I'm going to abstain from it. Now, in those moments of abstainal, there's actually more little micro branches that we're talking about, because now we look at the observer point and Cody's planting a garden, right? Cody's saying, hey, like I could do this. Cody's putting this time instead of doing that, which is familiar, which is ensnaring. And this is just how I'm trying to open your mind to one thing that can captivate us, to an actual infinite experience in life itself. Because life isn't an end all be all. That would be a complete that would be a complete false statement. Like, if life is an end all be all, imagine, like, I heard that term so many times. Like, this can't be the end all be all. This can't be just the pinnacle of everything. There has to be more to life. And to experience that, whether it's a new challenge, whether it's something, that's bringing you to a new horizon, whether you have that aha moment, whether you go back and you revisit something that you didn't see before, but now you're seeing it with a fresh set of lens. Life can be tackled in many perspectives, but if you have kind of like a tunnel vision mentality, and a lot of us do, like me including, like sometimes I miss out on the best experiences. There's a universe where I don't try this food, right? And then there's a universe where I try this menu item and I'm like, wow, this is, like you just unlocked something. So soul discovery, breaking free out of the chains, unlocking your inner standing, taking a moment. Now it's still going to try to throw you away. This is why it's important to journalize, to visualize, to meditate, to take that time for yourself before you go out there and you get swayed and pushed and swung by a multitude of reactive agents, right? From people, places, and things that try to test your inner capabilities. Take the time, whether it's in your car, whether it's in a moment of silence, you write down where you want to go. Fuck everybody else. Fuck everything else. Everything shouldn't matter at that moment. You're creating your life. You're creating conscious decision. Should I try this? Should I not try this? Is this, necessary for my growth? How will this affect me? Understand the value. Bring in the question of value. Is trying a new pizza item gonna hurt me? Composed to as, this new website, this new social media. What does this have to do? Oh, it's taking part of my time to do this, to do this. You understand the analyst of the choices that you're making. You're using discernment as well. Hey, I tried something new. I tried mango salsa. Wow, I love mango salsa. That's a preference. I tried this shampoo. I tried this shampoo. I tried this. I actually like this one. And that's where life gets interesting, because it doesn't have to be so close-ended. It doesn't have to be, this is the end all be all. I can express myself from preference. I just have to go out there, and I have to also want. I have to be a participant in the simulation itself, because the simulation is always going to give you, it's almost like it has a mind of its own, believe it or not. It's going to give you the resources, and it's also going to test you. Are you ready to go to the next level? Because think about this, and this is how we can actually end it all. If you play Grand Theft Auto, the game is already wholly rendered in its entirety. But let's just say you follow the main story quest. You don't get to see this building down this street that's already loaded into the game, because you're so focused on that initial point A to point B mentality. But here's the thing, the simulation already speaks. Now you go off of the storyline quest, you go down this street, you see this back street, you might see like this beautiful creek, you might see this beautiful nature landscape. You're like, wow. Just going off and what was it? Robert Frost, go off the beaten path. Everybody sees the same stuff. Plato's Cave can go into this as well. Be the one that takes the leadership to show that you want to at least see something different for yourself and experience it and come back, but also use, when you're going out and you're studying experiences, understand the value that it's bringing to your life. Right? So, like me conversating on multiverse theory, this is educating, this is fulfilling, this is actually meditative and therapeutic because I'm taking the time to understand something and actually share it. So now this is being created. I love this. So it's a lot to package. And there's a whole lot more topics on this, which I can't even just begin to fathom, right? So discovery would be knowledge, technology, simulation, possible worlds, choices inside this world, right? I like this. If a sufficiently advanced civilization can construct a simulated world containing beings capable of constructing their own simulated worlds, how many layers deep could the maze become? And here's the thing is we're all living within our own realities. So we're all simulating our own realities based on the many influences and the discovery, right? The initial discovery of things, right? My reality was revolving around League of Legends. It's because I discovered League of Legends and I loved League of Legends, right? And it's okay, but when something sits there and it says, hey, like, I want to put this timestamp over the rest of this life, this soul's life. I want, and of course we give it power, so these things thus become entities. They become idols. We start serving it because we give it the power. When we take our power back and we start exploring different possibilities, we start seeing the many versions, and we almost see a multi-dimensional being that was never supposed to be just a 3D experience, So when we can think in quantum, when we can think on the same level as AI, when we can actually say, hey, like, we're not dumb creatures. We have God written into our whole code. So we're here to understand it. This is where the game gets fun. So we're going to do more topics on it. This is part 2. It's a lot to take in, but we're going to jump back on it. Anyway, this is your boy. I'm tired.